So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whenever you're listening to this. This is Matthew Bailey and this is another episode of 6 Reels Deep. So this is, of course, my first time Halloween movie review series. So, similar to the, retrospect reviews I've been doing for years on this podcast here. This one is just specifically about horror films, mainly about, the classics and especially the ones that are celebrating anniversaries this year. So for this episode, we will be talking about one of the most iconic horror films, one of the most iconic slasher films ever made. That will be the late great Tobe Hooper's, I should say, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Yes, this movie came out 50 years ago. Wow, I really feel old, right? So, here we are just, celebrating it, right? And, that's just to kick things off, right? With this movie coming out in 1974, right? Just seeing it again with, in this era, in this decade, if you will, right? I'm just amazed at how much of a shock to the system it was, right? As far as low budget horror filmmaking goes, right? And while I was watching it, I was reminded that, the influence of it was so widespread, right? That both Wes Craven and Sam Raimi were inspired to make their films thanks to this movie, right? So Wes Craven would make The Hills Have Eyes, and Sam Raimi will make The Evil Dead. If you all know me, The Evil Dead for me, or the Evil Dead franchise is my top favorite horror franchise ever. Like, I love that franchise so much, right? But yeah, that The Evil Dead itself, especially the first one, wouldn't exist if it wasn't for this movie here, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? So when it comes to the lead antagonist in all of this, right? The man, the myth, the legend, the disgusting Leatherface. His origin is one where it depends on what film you're watching, right? So if it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning from 2006, it will tell you that, Thomas, as in, Leatherface, was working in this slaughterhouse one day, and the boss say, we shut it down, and then he get mad and kill him, and then he went home to his family, and these two couples get captured by Thomas' uncle Charlie, played by the late great R. Lee Ermey, I believe that's his name basically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Thomas took the skin off of one of the faces and become Leatherface. Kind of weird, but that's how they say it there, right? But if you remember from 2017's Leatherface, right, they'll tell you that it's Jedediah Sawyer, and he was sent to this mental institution because the police at the time was like, your family weird, so we're gonna put you in this mental institution. But then these two, like Bonnie and Clyde kind of couple, decide here's what we're gonna break out, and it's all kind of drama. But then eventually he runs home and he kills somebody, and then in the process he take this girl. This nurse who was working there, and he take the skin off of she face, and he become Leatherface there, right? So it's kind of weird, right? Yeah. When it comes to like the origin of Leatherface, it's all over the place,
The entire franchise is very messy, and not just in the naming of the franchise, but it's very inconsistent as to the origins of the family, Leatherface, everything. So it's as horror franchises go, it's not one that has really kept the narrative in any particular order that will make sense.
Yeah, exactly. So I will confess something here, right? And you guys can interject here, right? As far as the franchise goes, right? I've only seen, prior to me preparing for this, right? I've seen the first film like numerous times. I saw the second one once, and I watched it over again in preparation for this. I saw the beginning, which I mentioned earlier. Absolutely hated it, and I saw it over again. Yes, it's still bad. I hate it, just mainly because it was just gratuitous violence for the sake of it. There was no point it, there was no subtext it was just blood and guts because it's 2006 and Michael Bay producing this, so let me go all bloody and kill everybody and let Leatherface survive, and that's the point, evil wins, ha ha ha, right? I'm not a fan of that, to be honest. And I saw Texas Chainsaw 3D, which I absolutely hated. It was one of the worst films of the past decade, in my opinion, right? So I didn't bother to rewatch that. But in preparation for this, I watched the 2003 remake, and I remember a lot of people were talking bad about that because, how dare you try to remake, Texas Chainsaw Massacre? But I am one of the few that think that this remake actually did a great job in terms of capturing the nihilistic vibe of that film, right?
I think think so too.
Yeah, it's criminally
Yeah,
underrated though.
absolutely. Yeah.
And you got a great final girl out of Jessica Biel of all people. Like, what? Okay, this is
Uh-huh.
working. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the prequel, as in the beginning, does not work at all, right? Just talking quickly, right? So as far as Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, I understand why that show has its cult status. Like, if you're like me and you like to watch weird shows like on a Sunday night, it works. But the weirdness don't work with the law of Leatherface, and it just felt like a whole bunch of characters just talking loud and screaming and being weird and over the top, but there was no point to it, right? Part 3 is just forgettable, right? And so what's so make it so funny is that this was the one that the MPAA trim out a bunch of scenes because it was so graphic, but you watch this thing and it's so bland and so forgettable. I guess the only two things about it that's so memorable, Ken Forey, if you remember him from Dawn of the Dead, and Kenan and Kel, which I grew up on, and Viggo Mortensen is like, yeah, you in this too, and we supposed to buy you as this cannibalistic guy, like, okay, all right,
I think it was Vigo before he found his like acting stride. So I can give him some leeway.
Yeah, exactly. I still have not watched A New Generation. Even though Matthew McConaughey is in it, I just hear it bad, so I don't give him a bother to see it.
Here's the thing with that one. Personally, it has the acting is over the top. It's very corny in its own right, but at the same time, I feel like the part of it is very Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I do feel like there's a lot of love for the 1974 version in that 95 version, and maybe it's just a matter of the writing and the director didn't have the enough experience to really polish it up the way it should have been. Because honestly, it's very mean-spirited, which is something that I think the first movie is very much the same.
Yeah.
So, if you could check it out, I recommend checking it out. If just to see Matthew McConaughey is very different from how he would be for a very long time. So, I would say just give it a go and see what you think.
Right. Just a couple things, and then I'll just ask you guys your history with the franchise, right? So because I'll just get it out of the way. I never sought out the sequels and prequels. I just always stuck with the first one. I sort of discovered it as it's one of those classic horror films or like classic cult films that you just need to see. You know what I mean? So I saw it and I got the gist of it one time, and I just always kind of go back to it ever so often, right? But I'll close with the latest entry in the franchise. That would be 2022's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? Which for me had no excuse to be that bad, boy, but it was terrible. Hated it, right? So I just have one question. It's a dumb question, right? This is a dumb question, right? The story takes place 50 years after the first movie, right? And Sally, as in the final girl from the first film, which you'll talk about in a bit, right? Still alive, right? And she doing this whole Laurie Strode thing where, she wait 50 years to exact revenge on Leatherface, right? So my question is, how old is Leatherface? I seen this man going inside of a bus slaughtering people, and then the idiots pulling up the phones like, you can't cancel me, yeah. I see he lift up a man with the chainsaw, like, wait, a man in his 70s and 80s can't do that? Like, how old are you? How old is Leatherface's movie? I don't know.
Yeah, putting aside Michael Myers being powered by evil, like the Energizer Bunny is powered by batteries. I always used to wonder how come Michael Myers could be so old and so strong. For me, I think it's just bad writing on the part of the new movie. Once again, this series is extremely messy in terms of chronological narrative. So it really is it's an excuse to put him in this movie. They should have just either made him younger or say it's someone else.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so before we touch briefly on the original film, Alice, just your quick history with the franchise and what you thought about the sequels and prequels.
Well, I agree in terms of the consistency of the sequels. They are very messy, go back and forth, and they change the origin story, and it is extremely messy. But the entire franchise on the whole is not something that is my favorite. It kind of borders on kind of exploitation cinema because it's very gruesome, and it's kind of, to me, it kind of nauseates me to watch horror of that caliber. I mean, I like my blood and gore, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre to me was always on the extreme end of the spectrum. But I can appreciate the fact that the 1974 version, without it, wouldn't have had a lot of films that we have today that we appreciate.
Yeah, so Summer, just before we kick off our just quick review, yeah, your history with the franchise and what you thought, what you think about the the influence of the first film in particular.
Well, similar to what Alice said, for me, it's never been an easy franchise to stick with because I also am not a fan of quote unquote torture porn, as they call it. Like I said, the movies are they're very gritty, and they're very like I said, mean spirited, for want of a better term, and there's not a lot of hope in the overall story. However, it's one of those movies that, seeing it younger, I avoided it for a long time because it was so impactful and so it left such an impression. Seeing it as an older person, understanding what really goes into making these movies, especially in that timeline when the budget wasn't even a word. I appreciate everything that this movie, all the groundwork it laid for later films that didn't feel the need to pull its punches. They took guidance from Texas Chainsaw 74 when it came to that, and there's a lot of movies we wouldn't have had because of that.
Yeah, indeed. So just jumping into the show here, right? So in terms of just structure, right? I just love how well structured it is, right? So like the first act, for example, I love how it sets up the tension remarkably well, right? So we introduced to the 5 protagonists of the film. That would be Sally, her invalid brother Franklin, we have Kirk, we have his girlfriend Pam, and we have Jerry, and they're all looking for this old house that belongs to Sally and Franklin's grandfather, right? And then we're introduced to the first of Leatherface's family. That would be this hitchhiker who just starts acting weird, and he talks about head cheese, you know what I mean? And it's one of those things that they kind of forget about, but like he has this kind of weird rash on his cheek, this kind of blood red kind of rash, whatever it is on his cheek, and it just always makes him look kind of weird, right? And it's
a rash or a birthmark.
I don't know if it's a birthmark. It's probably a birthmark.
I think it's a birthmark. I've always thought it was a birthmark.
Yeah. And it's how weird he just starts acting. So like there's a moment where he takes a snapshot of them and then he burns the pictures, he's laughing, and then he takes Franklin's knife and he cuts his hand with it, and then he cuts Franklin's arm, and it's all that kind of stuff now, And what's so interesting about this scene in particular, right? Because when it comes to
picking up hitchhikers.
yeah. But like when it comes to this franchise, we just always associate with blood, right, and guts. But this is like one of the few moments where you actually see like blood, or I should say in this case, bloodletting, right? Because there's little blood in this particular movie, but the sequels just went over the reels, right?
That's true.
Yeah. And this part is one of those things that you kind of forget, right? Where you actually see who is primarily the patriarch of Leatherface's family. And there's this old man who runs this gas station, but also this barbecue joint now, you know what I mean? And that sort of touches into, just basically the idea of how cannibalism is used as a symbol in this movie, right? This idea of man reverting to eating meat or hunting for meat now. There's all this sort of like primal subtext to what you're seeing here, right? And then, of course, when they actually arrive at the house itself, I love how the movie continues to build tension, right? I like that it sort of subverts your expectation, okay, thinking, oh, all the chainsaw stuff is going to take place in this house, right? But there's actually another house because you see Kirk and Pam trying to get gas for their van, and that is the house where everything pretty much starts, right? Where everything kicks off pretty much, right? I love that the first shot, like when you go inside the house itself, right? You just see like the living room, you see the staircase, and you just see this room with this bright red wall, and you're seeing skulls from various animals, and you just see like one deer head in the middle. I just there like wondering what's going on now, And all it does take is just the sound of this pig squealing, right? And then Kirk goes inside. And then for me, one of the best and most effective entrances for horror villain I've ever seen though. How Leatherface just comes in, grabs him, knocks him out, and then slams the door.
Yes.
Especially with that bang of when that door slams, but it still
For me,
works though.
it's that body kicking on the floor.
Yes.
The way the body kind of kicks up. Because my grandmother used to raise chickens and ducks and kill them to eat, right, for food. And one time I was very little, and I remember her, I think I was maybe about 9 years old, and I remember her taking a chicken and slicing the neck and throwing it in this old out bathroom they had. And just hearing that thing just kicking up and stuff. So when I saw that scene, it's like, oh my God. It was very, very visceral. That whole moment, like you said, Matt, it's so good.
It is.
Yeah, because the body didn't realize that it's dead yet. So it's still item.
Yeah. And for me, I think this is why I have an affinity to this movie, right? Is the sort of low budget sort of documentary like style to it, like the film look of it. It just adds this level of creepiness to it now, you know? Especially when you see Leatherface's house and you see the floors just have all these chicken feathers and you have like bones, but it's animal and human bones hung from the ceiling. And then you see like this couch, but like is these bones kind of added to the frame of it is really bizarre though, but it works in just setting up, you know, this world of this DIY world of Leatherface, if you will, right?
DIY, I like that.
Yeah. And it's for the life of me, I was just like recapping this, right? I asked myself, wait, Tobe Hooper, right? You know, God rest his soul, right? You really intended this movie to be PG? Like dog, like Palm's death, right? Palm's death.
That's a myth, That's a myth.
Oh, it's a myth.
That
Okay.
wasn't true. He never intended. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that it's so bloodless. It's like Alice's favorite movie, Halloween. It just goes to show how talented people like Tobe Hooper, John Carpenter were. That there's not a lot of blood in this movie on screen, but the sound and the way it's shot, it's so impactful that you swear that you come out of that movie and you feel like you are covered with blood and visceral.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You feel guilty.
Yes. So there's no way he was going for a PG rating with that kind of feeling coming across in this movie.
Yeah, like in this scene in particular, I'm there like, this can't be PG, right? This couldn't have intentionally been a PG film. Yeah, this is where Pam is impaled on this meat hook, right? And the screams that she deliver always stood out to me though. It's just is like this mixture of shock and pain, you know what I mean? As you see it in her face now. And this is where...
If you ever walked in that pole backwards into your back.
Yeah, and I will give credit to the 2003 remake. In that case, it was a guy who was impaled. Yeah, they make that scene even more disgusting, right? But yeah, in this movie here, this is the moment where we are actually introduced to Leatherface's chainsaw, because Kirk's body is like right in front of her now, so she's watching her boyfriend just being cut up, right? But again, you're not seeing anything, or just hearing his screams, and of course you're hearing that chainsaw motor, and you know it going, the blade itself going into the flesh. And boy, like just the sound design as a whole works.
Call back to that scene.
Which one, sorry?
Sorry, the movie Wrongton. There's a lot of callbacks to Texas Chainsaw Massacre in Wrongton, and there's a scene in Wrongton where they watch their friend get cut up on a table, a female this time, and it's just as good. It's close, but yeah, it's definitely an homage to Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Right. Another thing I really love about this show here, right, is how it again, just going back to how the movie subverts the audience's expectation. It's with Franklin, because he just keep asking everybody if that crazy hitchhiker gonna come or track them down and kill them, right? But you know, at this moment, we don't even know that he's related to Leatherface, right? So I love that. I'm not gonna spoil how Jerry goes out, but for me, it makes for one of the film's most memorable reveals, in my opinion. And there's a moment afterwards, the way you see Leatherface just freaking out, like, you know, he do something bad and you feel like, oh, you know, somebody gonna punish me, right? And he sits near this window and the sun is on his face, and you see the leather face, like the leather face itself in full detail. And he just does this creepy thing where he starts moving his mouth and his tongue in this sort of like demented kind of way. And I just didn't watch this like again. Like again, who came up with this shit? This couldn't be a PG film. Who came up with the idea of a guy, creepy guy, just twisting his mouth and tongue and whatnot with, you know, a leather face, you know?
That was all Gunnar Hansen. That was all Gunnar.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. You know, the man, the mythic legend himself, Gunnar Hansen, right? But as far as the victims in this movie goes, I just feel so sorry for Franklin every time I watch this movie, right? And it's how they just build the tension from the start, right? Because Sally looking for Jerry, and not Pam and Cook for some reason, but they're just looking for Jerry. They just keep calling out Jerry, but they're even looking for Pam and Cook, right? Whatever, I don't care, moving on, right? And it's how how that moment ends with that great reveal of Leatherface, and he's just waiting for them in the woods, right? And to me, Franklin's death is the most graphic in the movie, even though you don't see a lot of blood. But it's just the implications of what Leatherface is doing. Because, he just basically chopping him, like basically impaling him, with the blade again and again and again, right? And that really makes his death even more disturbing, right? And I mean, Franklin is the most sympathetic character in the movie, and yet he goes out in the most violent way, you know what I mean? Agree to disagree, guys?
No, I agree. And what makes the death more impactful is the fact that, okay, the rest of them, they try to run, they could run, but Franklin can't run anywhere else.
Yeah, because he's wheelchair bound, you know? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And from there, we get this relentless, and after stressing this relentless third act boy with Sally and her just fleeing from Leatherface and his family, right? And speaking of family, there's a great reveal. It's very Psycho inspired, like, you know, the Alfred Hitchcock Psycho, where we assume are these corpses of this elderly man and woman, right? I'm saying that because of a great reveal later on, right? And the use of music is fantastic here. It's like this bit involving, like early on in the film, you hear this flashbulb sound effect, you hear that cheek, but you hear like what sounds like a blade, like a saw blade, and you hear that I can't articulate it, unfortunately, right? But
this song is insane in this entire movie.
Yeah.
That's another thing. The sound design is so good.
Yeah, but it's a very raw and guttural sound that you get here. It's literally like you're hearing somebody being cut open. Like basically that's how it sounds like, right? But it's when Sally is brought into the house as a captive and you see Leatherface's family and their dynamic with each other, especially with the father and the same hitchhiker guy is, boy, this is the moment where you're like, what the hell am I watching here, right? And I mean, there's a lot of subtext to pull from this, right? Like, for example, where Leatherface's dad starts beating him up for damaging the front door, but Leatherface have this woman's mask on, and the way how his voice sound, he mumbling, he sound like, you know, so
I don't even want to know the connotations of what that whole thing was. I don't want to think about it.
So it's like, is Leatherface the mother figure here? We don't even know. Like, it's just so weird, right? But yeah, as I said, Alice, is the pre-dinner and dinner scene, though, those moments always still to me, right? Everything about those two sequences are so savage and visceral, right? And again, there's little to no blood, right? Speaking of blood, though, the reveal of the grandfather, who was one of the two corpses there that we thought was dead, and then he starts sucking the blood off Sally's fingers, by Jesus Christ. That first time I saw that, by I was like,
you know the story behind how they get that blood?
Well, what's the story?
They made the actor really suck the girl blood in her.
You serious?
Because the problem is, the props was malfunctioning. And they were getting frustrated because that dinner scene took 26 hours to film in
102 degree heat.
Yes, I heard the interior of that film set was insanely hot. I know that. Yeah. And the dinner scene now where the old man and the hitchhiker and Leatherface start taunting Sally, right? And then you get the grandfather, involved in it too, boy.
So Gunnar Hansen, years after the movie, that it was her real blood that he sucked up. Now, I don't know how you can't tell that you're sucking on real blood as opposed to fake blood, but
I guess
He
that
said he did not know.
everything in the house, it was so disgusting because it's real old meat and all of that. When you think about
Yeah.
it, one of the things that could mess with your sense of taste is your sense of smell not working properly. So imagine
Yeah.
you sitting in that smell. He probably couldn't even taste what he was doing, and not to
Mm,
mention the stress of everything they were going through.
yeah.
That it just the entire movie was not a. It might have been a passion project for Tobe Hooper, and
Mm.
but for the people shooting it, it was a
It's
nightmare.
torture. Yeah.
Yeah.
They say that is like the history of filmmaking, that was the most toxic atmosphere that a film could have,
Hmm.
literally.
Yeah.
And they said that the film crew and the cast had to keep getting frequent breaks because they had to go outside to get fresh air and basically vomit.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And just to get back to, well, just to touch on Marilyn Burns, right, who plays Sally, right? She delivers a truly unhinged performance here, right? Because she's like screaming her lungs out, right, and trying to make sense of all the insanity she's seeing, right? And just going back to what you guys said, imagine her screaming in this extremely humid environment, right? So think about that for a sec. And as unsettling of a moment it is, though, I kind of love the extreme close up of her eyes as she's reacting to all this, and then you just hearing that seem sort of like that sound effect of the blade. You know what I mean? You hearing that in the background, but just those shots of her eyes,
Yeah.
though, just always slow to me. Like I love it. Like even though it's all messed up, right? And the final shots of this movie are some of the most iconic in horror film history. Just Sally in the back of that van, bloody from head to toe, laughing and screaming in exhilaration. Yeah. And then of course,
Historical, yeah.
yeah, and then of course Leatherface just doing this insane dance with the chainsaw in hand. I'm not sure if it's frustration because he didn't kill her, or is sadness because his brother got killed. You don't know.
Yeah.
He's what, sorry?
Yeah, he had actually cut himself by accident with the chainsaw, so he was in a lot of pain in that moment. That's what that was.
Wow, yeah, okay. And it's something about the sort of ballet.
Exhilaration.
Yeah, it's something about the ballet sort of spin that he does. It's kind of funny, but when you think about everything you saw behind it, it's kind of disturbing, right? But the beauty about that moment is the little you know, the better. You do know where Leatherface's head is at right now, but I mean, the whole show has pretty much been just this exercise in insanity, right? So at this point in time, Leatherface is just doing the most sane thing he could think of at that moment, right? But yeah, just to wrap things up, I am just amazed at how effective this movie is. 50 years since it came out, right? It still has the power to shock, but it's also quite captivating too, right? It just ropes you in from the very beginning, from the moment you see that text scroll and the events you're about to see, that kind of stuff. Though it just ropes you in, right? And it's just this very, very, very bleak nihilistic vision of this is like post-Vietnam America, right? Just this idea that human beings have sort of reverted to being animals now. We basically hunting each other down and trapping them, and it's that whole idea now of trapping human beings like animals, torturing them until they pass out, and you literally cut them open and you consume them, right? Just that whole mindset, though, just still works right to this day, right? It's a shame that, with the exception of the 2003 remake, which again is so criminally underrated, none of the other sequels and prequels were able to tap into that vibe, though. But with this one, though, Toby did his damn thing, and it is a bona fide horror classic. It's just as Alice was saying earlier. Yes, it's really not an easy film to sit through, right? It really isn't. Even with the almost bloodless vibe of it, it's still a tough film to sit through. But believe you me, if you just want to see a horror film that will stay with you for years to come, it's that, right? So for me, I'm gonna give this a 4.5 out of 5. I absolutely love this film. It's a classic. I can't wait to see how effective it would be, a decade from now, you know what I mean? Seeing that this movie is turning 50 years old, man. But that's just a testament to the bold vision that Tobe Hooper had, and just his resourcefulness now, just being able to tell this really bleak story, with a limited budget. That's still mind-blowing to me. So yeah, Alice, your final thoughts and rating on Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Well, I agree with everything that you said. It's a very surreal feeling to see that this film is celebrating its 50th anniversary. It makes me feel very old, but in essence, like you said, the impact that it's had on the horror film industry, it cannot be denied. The film will remain a classic among horror fans, horror junkies like ourselves, and I will give it a 5.5.
That'll be out of 10, right?
Yes.
Okay, that was like 5 out of 5. Okay, that's all right. Summer, your final thoughts and rating.
It's one of those movies for me personally that one of the things I love about movies in general is how your perspective on these films can change as you grow older. This is one of those movies that as a child, I thought it was so gross and so disgusting. And
Oh wait, you saw that as a child? Oof. Okay, I saw that like in my 20s, so you saw it as a child. Ooh.
Yeah. I saw a lot of things as a child. Maybe I shouldn't have. But the joke being that my dad wasn't okay with sex and boobs and stuff, but violence, no problem. But anyways, I'm watching it again over and over again over the years. Like I said, I wouldn't say it's one of my personal favorites, but from a movie perspective, this thing gets better every time I see it, just because I appreciate not just what went into making something like this, but the fact that it's so relevant to what's happening now. It's a sad state of affairs to think that the world we have this movie is still relative to that. You would hope things would have gotten better. All those things you said, Matthew, about man basically eating man. We treat each other like animals instead of people. All of that is so relevant. But yeah, from the movie side of things, I would even rate this as scarier than The Exorcist. I know it's considered the second scariest movie of all time. I think it's number one. Just the fact that it's so grounded in reality. And when you watch this movie, it's one of those movies where you feel like, hey, I will never take a trip out to the Midwest, because you feel like stuff like this really, if you watch certain YouTube documentaries, stuff like this kind of does happen to people, sadly, so it makes everything you see and just feel so much more terrifying in the fact that it could actually happen as opposed to The Exorcist, no disrespect to The Exorcist, but I've never thought that movie was that scary. This movie for me definitely delivers on what it's trying to say, what it's trying to convey. That, as you say, is very nihilistic, and up to now we still get films like this. House of a Thousand Corpses definitely an homage to this, but this year we're supposed to get this remake of Speak No Evil with James McAvoy, and I've seen the original, and it's also a very bleak look at human nature and how our best instincts, we tend to deny our instincts and allow, our culture and society to basically be the end of us. So for me, I would rate this like a 9 out of 10 for me. And it's definitely not where I would have started when I was younger. This for me would have been like a 5 out of 10 as well, because I was simply adoring anything that was Friday the 13th. I liked my slashers. Very simple. I liked my survivors that seemed hopeful, whereas of course Sally seemed like she was going to end up in an insane asylum. I really appreciate everything that this movie has offered, and I think 50 years from now it will still be as iconic. It's definitely a movie that has held up insanely well in terms of its atmosphere and everything that it was trying to do.